Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to talk about how you can use NSwagStudio to generate client for your web API. In our last episode, we added Swagger middleware to our web API so that our front-end developers can have nice UI to find out which APIs that they can consume and what are the schemas, and depending on the schemas that they can create the models to transfer data between server and client, right? But even after you have all this information, it's difficult to create client for your API. You'll have to list down all the APIs in your client application. You'll also have to create models depending on the schemas, and then you'll have to CLS and DCLS each object for each and every request. So instead of doing that, what you can do, you can ask your front-end developers to use NSwagStudio. NSwagStudio takes JSON endpoint as an input, and then it can create C# client or TypeScript client depending on what API that you're using, what front-end application that you're using, right? You can see that it creates functions, it creates public functions, so you can use the C# client file in your client application to consume the API. And then you do not have to worry about creating the models. You do not have to worry about deserializing and deserializing this objects before sending and receiving data. And also, if your backend developer goes and makes some changes into API and updates the API, the only thing that you have to do is get the updated Swagger JSON endpoint and put it in NSwagStudio to generate a new client. You do not have to go back to Swagger document to see what all changes which were made, right? So what we're going to do today, we are going to use NSwagStudio to create client, and then we'll use that client in a brand new Blazor server application and see if we can consume the API or not. There will be some challenges that we'll face, but we'll talk about how we can overcome those challenges. Okay, so I've already installed this NSwagStudio on my machine. I'll mention the link where you can get this NSwagStudio in the video description. So the first thing that we're going to need the JSON endpoint. So we have already added Swagger in our web API, and you can get the JSON endpoint from here. So when I click on it, you can see that this is my JSON endpoint. And I'm going to go ahead and put that JSON endpoint into the specification URL tab here, OpenAPI Swagger specification. Once I mention that, then also you'll have to select the runtime. So we are going to create Blazor server application, and the latest version currently is .NET 3.1. So I'm going to select that runtime, and then you can select the output depending on what client you're using. You can either create in TypeScript client. Let's select TypeScript so that I can show you how it looks like. And then I'm going to create C# client that I'm going to use in my Blazor server application. You can also do some settings here, but before I change any settings, let's first go ahead and create the output and see how it looks like, right? So I'm gonna click on this generate output button. That will go ahead and create client for me. It will create objects, it will create functions, so that I do not have to worry about what are the APIs, what's the location of the API, what kind of API it is, get function, put function. I don't have to worry about any of that, and it creates public functions for me. One challenge that I faced while creating this client was if your path location is same, and even if your HTTP methods are different, it still creates it numbers your functions. So let's look at this function. This is an authors function, which is I think it's a create function. You can see that it's a create function, but it did not name my authors as create author. It named as authors async. And then you can see that it created authors to async, which is a delete function. And that is happening because the API locations for create and delete are same. So to fix that, the reason why these are same is because when we created our web API, when we created our controllers, we used Visual Studio scaffolding to create these controllers, right? So one way you can, we have to make sure that we have different API paths in order to create different functions. We need to name our functions really good so that our front-end developers can understand what it's doing, right? So make sure that the function names are in your API path so that the client which is getting generated has proper function names. So this is my create author function. So I'm going to say that it is create author, and this is delete author, so that I'm going to mention delete author in my API path here. Okay, and now let's try to run this and see what client is going to generate. When I run it, you can see the names, the API path changed for create and delete. And if I go back and generate the output again, you can see that it's naming my delete author and create author because we changed the path of our APIs. Okay, so now that our API client is created, the other things that I noticed is it's, by default, the namespace is my namespace and the class is client. But these are the things that you can change from settings. You can go to namespace and here say that it's a bookstore service. It's a bookstore service. And then you can change the class name to bookstores client. You can say that it's bookstores client. Okay, and if I go back to output and regenerate my output, you can see that the namespace is bookstore service and the client is bookstores client. Okay, so let's go ahead and add the C# class in our Blazor server application, our brand new Blazor server application. I'm gonna go to my Visual Studio here and create a new project. It's a Blazor application, and I'm gonna create a Blazor server application. I'm creating Blazor server application is because for Blazor WebAssembly you need to add course support, which is cross-origin resource sharing support, which we haven't done it in our web API yet. So I'm gonna go ahead and use Blazor server app here. I'm gonna create that Blazor server app, and let's build it before we add the client. So I'm going to build that, and you can, instead of copy pasting the whole code, what you can do is like get the location of your project which is created. I'm going to get the location of the project, and I can put that location in my settings. Here, and say that I would like to create bookstores client. The name of the C# file is going to be bookstores client.cs, and then we can ask to generate the file. Nice. The file is generated. If I go back to my client, you can see that it created bookstores client in my Blazor application, which we just created. It's going to throw some errors because it does not find NewtonSoft. But we can go to our NuGet package and say that let's install the most famous package on NuGet. Once I install that, you can see that these errors are going to go away. Nice. I'm going to go ahead and build this application one more time. And build is successful, and we do not have any errors. Sweet. So if I want to use this bookstores client to get information, we'll have to create client first. So this is what we're going to do. We are going to write some code on our index page, which is pretty straightforward, hello world page. And here we'll try to consume this bookstores client. So first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to list down all the publishers in my all the publishers in my application from my API. So I'm going to say using bookstore service, so that we do not have to keep on writing bookstore service every time we want to use bookstores client. And then I'm gonna add some code. I'm gonna say code, and I want to write consuming API functionality on my onInitialized page. So I'm going to say that let's make a protected, let's override onInitialized function here. onInitialized function. onInitialized function, and then I want to consume a bookstores client here. So I'm going to create a new instance of bookstores client. I'm going to say bookstores client and create a new instance here. When I try to create a new instance, you can see that it's asking for the base URL and HTTP client as an input. So you can get base URL from your Swagger document, which is the root of the API, and you can pass it here. You should put this in your app settings, but I'm just going to show you the teeny tiny demo, so I'm not going to do that. And for HTTP client, I'm going to use HttpClientFactory to create HTTP client. To do that, I'm going to go to my startup class and add HTTP support. I'm going to say services.add HTTP client, which will add the HTTP services for my application. And then I'm going to inject HttpClientFactory so that I don't run into socket exhaustion issues. If you want to find out more about HttpClientFactory, you can check out my video of HttpClientFactory on my channel. And then I'm going to use HttpClientFactory to create the client, which returns HTTP client. Awesome, right? Now we have bookstores client. Let's go ahead and get some publishers and show it on our page. So to do that, I'm gonna create a collection of publishers, and you can see that it created models for us too. It created publisher model in bookstore service so that we can use this publishers, and we do not have to create those models. And I'm going to call it as publishers. And then we'll try to get these publishers from our API. To do that, I'm going to say publishers is equal to bookstores client and dot. And you can see that it listed down all the functions as API calls. So when you call these functions, it will call that API and get data, create, update, delete, all the CRUD operations that you can do from bookstores API. So here I'm going to say that we would like to get publishers, and this is an async function, so we'll have to write an await keyword here. And then I'm going to say that it's an async function. So we'll have to put async keyword there. Nice. And let's not return this. Okay, so now we have publishers. Let's write a for loop to show these publishers on our page. To do that, I'm going to first check if publishers are not null, so that we don't face any exceptions on the page. And then I'm going to write a for each loop. I'm going to write a for each loop in which I'm going to say publishers. Get those publishers from publishers, and then list down the names of the publishers, publisher names on my page. And I'm going to add a breakline here so that it looks nicer. Sweet. And that is all you need to do in order to consume the API. Let's run this and see if this is working or not. So I'm going to run that, Control F5. And if I go to my home page, my index page, you can see that it created, it listed down all the APIs, all the publishers from my API. Awesome, right? So this is how you can get information from your API. Let's go ahead and create a publisher. To do that, I'm gonna create a button. I'm gonna create a button and say that it's a save button, and let's add some class to it so that it looks nice. I'm gonna say it's a button primary, and on this save click, I would like to create a publisher. So to do that, I'm gonna create this bookstores client as a class variable so that I can have access of this bookstores client in other functions too. And let's get rid of this. Nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and create an async function. I'm gonna say it's private async task create author. Create a new publisher, new publisher. And now we're going to call this function on save click. So I'm going to go to button, and here I'm going to say on click, we would like to call create publisher. Create publisher. Nice. So on create publishers, the only thing that you need to do, you need to create the instance of publisher, and then call bookstores create publisher async and pass the publisher instance into it. So let's go ahead and create a new publisher, new publisher instance, and I'm gonna say it's a new publisher. The name of the publisher is India Times, and the city is Mumbai, and then state is Maharashtra. Okay, so now we have the instance of our publishers, which is in Mumbai, and we would like to create this publisher in our database. To do that, I'm gonna call bookstores client, which gets initialized on initialized async, and then I'm gonna say create publisher async. And here you can see that it takes publisher as an object for creating publisher in our database, and you do not have to serialize, deserialize these objects in order to consume this application. And then I'm going to say send publisher in here, and this is an async function, so I'm going to put in a wait keyword. And when I click on save button, that should create publisher, right? Let's see if this is working or not. So you can see that these are the publishers which are already there. And when I click on save, it's going to throw an error. Let's check out what the error is. It's saying that the HTTP response was not expected. It was not the response, HTTP status code of the response was not expected of 201. And this is happening because in our API, when we created the publisher, when we create the publisher, we are not returning the publisher, we are returning created at action result as the return type. So this is one challenge that I faced, and that's what I'm sharing with you. And to fix that, what you can do, you can just like return the publisher which has been created, which was passed actually, which gets updated as the return type in your web API. And once you do that, let's put in a wait period here, and let's read on this. That should run my web API, and I'm gonna go back to my Blazor server application and run this again. And you can see that it had created India Times. When on the save click, it was not just able to return the object back. So if I click on save again, I'm not getting any exception, and I refresh the page, you can see that India times gets added again in my database. That means it's working fine. And that's how you can read and create data using the client which has been created by NSwagStudio. I tried updating and deleting, and it works like a charm. But if you face any issues, you can definitely put it in the comment section. We can talk about it. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook. And I code live on Twitch, so if you want to come and hang out with me, you can always do that. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.